Hi, I'm Christan with the Getzen Company, and today I'm here with Jon Whitaker. And Jon contacted me last year.
Yeah, we're trying to come up with when it was, August, September, something like that of 23, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting. He approached me about a project that I've never been involved with, and it was he was talking about marching band. And I was in marching band 4 years at Texas Tech. I personally loved it. I enjoyed going to the football games. I enjoy that aspect of sport, of just being a part of it. And the marching was fun too. It was I liked everything. And a lot of musicians are like, oh, it's terrible for my chops. Right. But I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. You had to warm up a lot the next day, after that. But it was about doing some Getzen trumpets and a trombone. Now, take it away.
So part of my job at the University of Alabama and what I'm able to do there is that I have a really close association with the marching band there. Have served as the photographer for the band for 10 years. It's sort of a hobby of mine. And have been on the teaching staff, the full-time teaching staff, for the last 3 years. Probably over the course of my 15 years of being at the university, we have been approached by and or have held meetings with all the major instrument companies about getting the marching band at Alabama outfitted with a matching set of instruments. Up until right now.
Why?
Up until right now, all of the trombones and trumpets and woodwind instruments and saxophones were all just, everybody brought their own student instrument. And so from just a sheer visual aspect of it, it just sort of looked a little bit hodgepodge.
Everything.
Yeah, it does.
Now,
and I think your general public football fan hears with their eyes.
Yeah.
So if the band looks good, they assume that it sounds good.
Yeah.
That's not always the case, as we know. But that was one piece of the puzzle. The other thing is having some sort of uniformity in terms of the sound, particularly between the trumpets and trombones, which in a band our size contributes a great deal to the sonority and the volume of the band. And so having them, fast forward a little bit, spoiler alert, we bought a bunch of instruments from Getzen, and I was shocked at the difference in sound the band had once we had everybody outfitted at the mid-season this year, particularly when the first when the trombones got there. It's like, man, this is a big deal. So anyway, we'd been contacted and had contacted a bunch of the instruments, and we had been doing meetings and testing things, and so, but never really could pull the trigger. And I'm not sure if the timing wasn't right, if it was financial. I'm not really privy to all the workings of how that went. But I do know that they got very serious a year and a half ago about making this a reality.
Yeah.
And financially, it wasn't going to be a reality to purchase piccolo through bass drum. And so it was we're going to piece it out. And so the instruments that we needed to unify visually were the alto and tenor saxophones, the trumpets, and the trombones. We have mellophones, we have marching baritones, we have sousaphones. They're all the same. Most of them are the same color. Some of them are old, but they all look silver. And so there were some financial pieces of the puzzle put in place to where it's time to make this happen. So then the director of bands, who's a really close friend of mine and trusts me for some reason, I'm not quite sure why, what should we do about these brass instruments? He had also gotten some bids, I think, from a couple other companies, and could you look at these model numbers or whatever? And what I found very quickly is the trombone that I would want the band to play, and I have a little bit of hand in the way the band sounds, and have a really good relationship and knowledge of the way the guy that writes for the band, how he writes for the brass section and the trombones or whatever. It didn't seem to me like, and if finances were an issue, the financial issue, it didn't seem like we needed an instrument with an F attachment. But I also didn't want a small bore instrument out there. And the only sort of intermediate line instruments that we could find that we felt like we could get within a reasonable amount of time, none of them had a wide hand slide. Most of them had your narrow in that intermediate. And then if you were to get a wider hand slider, you're getting into a way different price point, than what they're going to want to. We bought 40 of them.
Yeah.
We get in a way different price point. And so I was like, man, I'm just really reluctant about purchasing these or whatever. And he's like, well, who makes what it is you're talking about? I'm not sure. And I said, I'm not really sure anybody does. But I know a guy. Let me see. And so that's when we had started the discussion. You and I personally had already been discussing some mouthpiece things for me personally. That's how the whole thing came about. It was in discussion about me wanting to do some things with a mouthpiece. And as you do, so let me work on it. Let me see. And then fast forward then to that December, which was December 14, 15, right in there. In 22, I guess it was, because we just passed 23,
right,
so 22,
right.
December
yeah,
22, right. I came up, and the other than the personal things that we were doing for me with mouthpiece and what ended up being a personal instrument for me, the main objective of my trip was to come up to play test and sign off on the design of what we had talked about and what you had put together, and you'd been sending me pictures along the way, and you would play it and send it to me or whatever.
Yep.
Really what we needed to do on that visit is dial in what lead pipe we wanted.
Yeah.
And we did change the one that was in there. I just wanted something. I wanted to try to design an instrument that was loud, for lack of a better, incredibly loud, but held together.
With great projection.
With great projection. Didn't break up. Like I think some of my studio members in the members of my trombone studio that happened to march in the marching band even said, I'm trying to get this thing to break up and it just won't. And I'm like, yeah, well, you need to, you need to practice. But no, it really holds together really well. So we tweaked the lead pipe a little bit, and we also dialed in what we felt like what the perfect mouthpiece might be to pair with that when they're sold to the general public.
Right.
So we ended up ordering. We signed off on that. Everybody was happy with that. Then Getzen had also sent down to us a couple of stock trumpets.
Yep. The 700 SP and the 900.
Exactly. Yep. And we had a couple of the students, a graduate student, maybe a student in the band or whatever, sort of play test. And I had done a little bit of research too, calling a few friends that I have that teach trumpet at universities that have matching instruments.
Yeah.
What do you have? And found a couple people that didn't have complete line, but they had, they may have done 15, 20 at a time and just sort of on a repeating basis and sort of rotate that. And so it's like, well, what do you have? And they would tell me, and then it always came up, well, we have, 20 of these 700S Getzen trumpets. And so then that was the one between the two that the people that we had play test them in Alabama picked. And so we got, what did we get, 65 of those?
Yeah, 65.
And we got 40, and this is the instrument.
The 1447.
1447.
Yeah.
The ones that we ordered for our purposes were silver plated, and the silver, the counterweight is silver. A little bit of custom engraving on there, which is awesome.
We did the $1 Million Band logo.
Yeah, the logo is on the counterweight, and I'm still, every time I sort of get a chance to stand back and listen to the group and sort of reflect on the year and think about sort of the projection of, or the trajectory of the band and how they've progressed over the year, the difference that it made. Particularly with the trombone.
Well, having the right timbre, or the same timbre, and it's easier to lock, and then having the larger bore, you can move a lot more air.
Yeah, and again, maintaining the sonority that you want. Sometimes they're really moving a massive amount of sound and massive amount of air through these things, but it holds up. It doesn't get overly brittle or bright, and it projects. It's in the mix. You heard the band live
it's unbelievable.
in November in Indianapolis, and just sort of the mix and the blend. A big part of that is the guy that writes for us. Writes for Carolina Crown, one of the top drum and bugle corps, and I think a lot of people in that activity would argue that they have the best sounding brass are among the best sounding brass. And I think a lot of it, obviously it's good teaching and pedagogy and talent, but it's really, a lot of it is the way he scores, and he puts everybody in a really great register to where things are, overtones can ring and things are spaced out and kids can sound good, you know. And so, yeah, this is it in the lacquer form.
So what's interesting is this instrument, it has a nickel in crook. So that really aids in projection.
Right.
Actually, on your some instruments they'll have a yellow in crook but it'll create more width. But then the sound doesn't go as far forward.
Right.
It does have the wider slide. The narrower slides are more like a Con 88.
Right.
And this is not that. But it doesn't have the bass crook like it would on a lot of Edwards.
Right.
But this has more of like a 3047 in crook, which is more of we call it a con style, but it's really not. It's not a square like a box style. It's more of a single semi.
Yeah.
If you would. It actually does have an interchangeable lead pipe, and the reason I did that is when you're on the marching field, I want things to be easy to repair.
Yeah.
And if something happens, it's easy to take the lead pipe out and work with it there, rather than if it's soldered in and you get the mouthpiece stuck. The player's kind of screwed.
Yeah.
You know, they have to go get a mouthpiece puller. So I want to keep things simple. If they crunch a bell, you don't have to worry about a valve section getting all hung up in the rotor binding.
Right.
They could still play even if there's a lot of dents on this. And when it comes time to repair it, 2 solder joints and you can replace a bell.
Right.
I wanted to make this as easy as possible to do that. And then balancing it out, having the counterweight, which is it threads on. There's no screws. There's nothing to lose.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know,
or break.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it is a single radius tuning slide, and with that, it's going to be a little bit more open, which is what you want. Now, I don't look at this honestly as just a marching instrument.
Well, so I was going to say that because that was obviously what led us to that particular account and purchase and purpose is what that led to. But I really could see me personally and professional players or whatever having an instrument like this in their arsenal, without a valve, maybe a little bit different sound and a little bit less cumbersome to have to operate in terms of the weight of the instrument and the way it responds or whatever. I mean, this would be something that I could play it in the orchestra, I could play it solo repertoire or whatever, and it still, again, maintains the quality of sound that everybody is sort of driving at this time, where we find ourselves in the market.
And I've used this as a great practice tool, and I think more people should play on a straight instrument at least once a year. And even bass players, I haven't told you this, I made a straight bass, and I've made bass players play it because I'll hear an inconsistency in timbre sometimes, and they're so used to the previous instrument, we may have inconsistent rotors and everything, that they'll manifest, it'll start manifesting in them.
Yeah.
So if I put them on a straight bass, then all of a sudden they're like, oh. I'm like, yeah, it's a trombone.
Yeah.
And then it gets rid of any valves or any issues that you may have. And then you can iron it out here, and then when they go back to a valve instrument that's a good valve instrument, the problem's gone.
Right.
And so I think it's a fantastic tool to use and have in your arsenal when you don't need the weight of a valve. We all get into this, we see X or this, and it's like, well, I've got, why? If you don't have to work, don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the Getzen 1447, we have dealers all over the world. It's a great instrument. It's a 22 gauge bell, so it's not heavy, it's not light, it's just straight up 22 gauge, which is pretty standard.
Yep.
It's yellow brass unsoldered, and so you're going to get more highs in the sound, but that's what aids in the projection.
Right. And it's just, like I said, I can't reiterate and state enough how great it has been to get these in our students' hands, and they've all have really raved about how they like playing them, and it's meaningful to them because they have something that was basically created in concept because of needing this sort of void to be filled not only with our program but also in the market.
Right.
We're really grateful for all the people at Getzen, yourself and everybody here to sort of work with us and get these to us, and we're able to. It was really great to be able to see our band on the field at the Rose Bowl with all these instruments and just looking great and sounding great. And it was, it's been a great, this has added to a really successful and great season for our students this fall. So.
Well, we appreciate you working with us to help create the 1447 Getzen. And if you're out and you are stopping by your local Getzen dealer, ask them if you can try one. Because if you don't ask, they won't stock them. That's a proven fact. So make sure to request to try a 1447. I think they're fantastic, and more people should probably consider playing just a straight trombone, even if it's a large bore. You can still play small bore, obviously, for if you're playing lead or something else. But I don't think there's anything in the marching band rep that requires a small bore.
No, I mean, not at least not the way that we.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The way that we sort of tend to do it in Tuscaloosa. This fits exactly what our needs were down there, and I think, other groups and other schools, and I think it'll really take off for that. But also, like you said, it could be an instrument that you would have in your arsenal for other types of styles and purposes. So.
Well, appreciate your help.
Thanks. Absolutely.
Thanks for being here, and we'll see you around.
Yep.